The Wall Street Journal just published an article called 10 Questions to Ask Yourself About the Transition to Renewables. The author's intent wasn't to provide a right or wrong answer, but rather to incite conversation. Here are those 10 questions and my thoughts in response to those questions. Number one, a homeowner objects to a wind farm that's visible from his window. How much of a say should he have? What if so many homeowners object that it becomes impossible to expand wind farms to any great extent? My response: one of the great things about the American Republic is that local citizens have the opportunity to participate in local city or county council meetings to voice support or objections over certain projects that could negatively or positively impact their neighborhoods. I believe everyone has that right to voice these concerns regardless of where you might stand on the specific project. Ultimately, decisions to approve such projects rest with elected officials, thus reiterating the importance of being engaged with local elections. Number two, advocates for government funding for electric vehicles, solar, and the like compared to insurance, spending money now to reduce the chance that we'll have to spend even greater amounts in the future to cover the damage caused by storms, droughts, and other impacts of global warming. Do you find that analogy persuasive? If so, why or why not? My response: unfortunately, a majority of today's global population does not have the luxury of spending money today for something that could benefit us tomorrow. Survival is all that matters. Somehow, to change the habits and behaviors of a majority of the Earth's population will require the society and communities around them to provide education and alternatives to their current ways of life that may harm the environment. Question number three, should the U.S. speed up the energy transition by becoming more dependent on foreign countries for critical materials for solar panels like batteries and the like? Or should it slow down the transition until it can build domestic supply chains for these products? My response: this is a huge topic for debate. The artificially induced panic to become net zero by 2050 has produced some decisions that may not be in the best interest for our country. Relying on other countries to provide the raw and finished materials for energy independence can be a recipe for disaster. Currently, the U.S. obtains a majority of the components needed for solar panels from China. If China chose to disrupt their supply of these materials, the U.S. would not be able to rely on solar as a viable energy source. Number four, California has a 2035 deadline to phase out gas car sales. Should the federal government mandate a countrywide phase out of gas car sales? If so, how far in the future is reasonable? My response: while an artificial deadline such as California mandated for gas-powered vehicles can spawn invention, it can also create panic that forces bad decisions. When states like California already have a strained electrical grid, how can replacing millions of gas-powered vehicles with EVs that will need to draw power from those strained grids work? Replacing the entire power production grid by 2035 may not be feasible and could cause more carbon emissions, as more electric cars will be pulling from fossil fuel dependent grids leading up to the 2035 deadline, which will only create more pollution until other baseload power sources like geothermal or nuclear become available. Question number five, do environmental concerns motivate you to consider buying an electric vehicle? If so, how much more would you be willing to pay for it? Would you buy it for $1,000 more, $5,000 more, $10,000 more? My response: at the end of the day, people's own financial situation will always trump concerns about the environment. If a family can barely afford the increase in food prices and current power bills, how can they be expected to pay any extra amount for an electric vehicle? Additionally, the lower income section of our society relies on older, higher mileage vehicles that are under $10,000. At this point, there is little to no availability of used electric vehicles at that price point that could be relied upon. And if there are, most likely it's because the batteries or other major components don't work. There would have to be a huge government subsidy on electric vehicles before families who are already cash strapped could even think about affording an electric vehicle. Question number six, should poorer countries be able to transition to cleaner power more slowly than richer countries, maybe even increasing their pollution to improve living conditions? Do you agree with rich countries' commitments to subsidize the transition for poorer countries? My response: finding food and shelter day by day is a huge problem for millions on the planet. The last thing someone who is hungry for food is thinking about is, how can the way I cook that food that I find hurt the environment? If richer countries want true reduction of fossil fuel emissions, they may have to find a way to financially incentivize and support those countries who don't have the luxury of thinking that way. Question number seven, should consumers receive incentives to buy electric vehicles? If not, Should owners of gas-powered cars pay a fee to account for the environmental damage of their cars? My response: many Americans can barely afford their car they have, let alone be able to afford a fee for fee or tax for driving a gas-powered car. The only people that increase electrical bills, food prices, and fuel costs hurts is the lower class of our society. Having a car at all is a luxury, and demanding that that vehicle be electric is something may not be possible for many decades to come, until such point where electric vehicles can be purchased for between $5,000 to $10,000. Question number 8. Should nuclear power play a bigger role in energy production? How big a risk of a catastrophic accident would be acceptable? Would your answer change if the nuclear power plant were to be placed in your own town? My response: I believe there are still huge education and information barriers to nuclear power. Nuclear is one of the cleanest forms of energy on the planet. However, when nuclear reactors such as Fukushima or 3 Mile Island melt down, the environmental impact could be catastrophic. What most people don't know is that Fukushima started construction in 1967 and 3 Mile Island began construction in 1969. Nuclear technology has advanced so far that if the nuclear reactor was built today, many of those same problems that was faced in those meltdowns would never happen today. There needs to be a huge education push for politicians and the general public to be comfortable with one of the cleanest sources of energy on the earth. Question number 9. Should consumers get to use as much fossil fuel created energy as they want if they can afford it? Do we owe anything to future generations who may be affected by climate changes caused way before their time? My response: that is what is amazing about free markets. People choose what is best for themselves based on a variety of factors. If there was a cheaper, more convenient way to get and use energy, that would be adopted very quickly. When governments force its citizens to pay more for something they don't want or need, wide and sustainable adoption becomes difficult. History has shown us that if you want wide adoption of a product, service, or technology, you need to make it more affordable and convenient. Convenience stores got their name because of the proximity and ease of access for so many within their communities. If providing a cheaper and more reliable form of power was available to convenience store owners, they would offer it for sale. Forcing businesses and consumers to do something out of fear is never good and never a reliable way to do anything. Question number 10. Should developed countries whose past growth has led to climate change compensate poor countries that are at environmental risk, for instance, from flooding? Should specific companies provide such compensation? My response: again, forcing anyone to do anything they don't want to do is tyranny. When a product or service is desirable because it is better, cheaper, more convenient, etc., that's when people are willingly pay in exchange for that item. So while I agree that we owe our future generations a chance for a cleaner earth, forcing people to do things now isn't a good and sustainable way to achieve that. I believe that humans have enough ingenuity that we can collectively find a better way to produce and consume energy that won't hurt the environment. Governments can create the mandated deadlines that can help speed up technology innovation timelines, but they rarely can create those things themselves without somehow increasing taxes for all of its citizens. Take, for example, deep power. We are developing new technology that we hope will allow us to tap into the Earth's unlimited source of heat energy. We know that the only way to succeed at doing this and make it a sustainable alternative is if we can access this geothermal energy cheaper and cleaner than current oil and gas options. To learn more about these efforts, please visit us at www.deeppower.com.